Hi, my name is Martin Hale. I never thought the worst betray your daughter wants you out of the house tonight. That was the moment my world shifted when the people I trusted most turned my home into a battlefield. Nathan Cole believed this day would be like any other. The steady hum of his coffee machine filled the small but meticulously kept kitchen, the rich scent of Arabica wrapping around him like an old friend. Morning sunlight poured through the wooden blinds, scattering warm stripes across the rows of books he'd collected over decades. Retirement had been good to him so far. 35 years as a project engineer had earned him the right to slow mornings' long walks and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd built this home with his own hands. The phone rang. It was an odd hour for calls. Most friends knew better than to ring before 8, and Nathan never subscribed to those unsolicited marketing lists. He wiped his hands on a towel and reached for the receiver, expecting a neighbor's casual request or perhaps an old colleague checking in. Instead, it was his son, Daniel. Nate Daniel began skipping any greeting we need to talk about the house. The tone was clipped, businesslike, not the voice of a son talking to his father, but of someone about to deliver terms. Nathan felt his grip tighten on the phone. "What about the house?" he asked. Daniel hesitated for just a beat too long. "Paige and I think it's time you consider downsizing. That place is too big for you now. And with the market the way it is, we could get a great price. You'd have enough left over to get something smaller, maybe a condo. We could handle all the paperwork for you." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a plan already formed without him. Nathan could almost see the conversation they'd had without him present the calculations, the division of proceeds, the subtle erasure of his role in deciding his own future. "I'm not selling my house, Daniel." Nathan set his voice even. "That's not the point," Daniel pressed. "We've already spoken to an agent. She's coming by next week to take pictures. This is the smart move for everyone." For everyone. The phrase hung in the air like a threat. Nathan's mind ticked through possibilities. Was this about money status? Or something else entirely? He remembered the small shifts over the past year. Daniel dropping hints about property values, Paige making backhanded remarks about wasted space. The way their visits always ended with them glancing around as if they were mentally rearranging the furniture. And then Daniel added the part that made Nathan's pulse sharpen. "If you don't agree, we might have to take legal steps." "You wouldn't want that mess, Dad." It was not only a betrayal, it was an ultimatum. Nathan leaned back in his chair, staring at the steam curling from his coffee mug. He didn't respond right away. In that silence, Daniel probably thought his father was processing defeat. He wasn't. He was planning. By the time Nathan hung up, the calm of the morning had fractured completely. But beneath the thin layer of shock, a quiet resolve had begun to take shape. If his son and daughter-in-law wanted a fight over the one place that had always been his sanctuary, they were about to find out just how much of an engineer's mind they'd underestimated. Outside, the coffee machine beeped, announcing the brew was ready. Nathan poured himself a cup, the first sip unusually bitter, but oddly fitting for the day ahead. The doorbell rang. Through the glass, he saw a woman in a sharp blazer holding a leather portfolio, the real estate agent. And Nathan knew the battle had just begun. Nathan opened the door just enough to greet the woman on the porch. She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. I'm Linda Harper from Crescent Realty. Daniel and Paige mentioned we'd be meeting today." Nathan kept his expression neutral. "They did they?" Linda's smile flickered a fraction too fast. "Yes, they said you were ready to take the next step. It's a seller's dream market, and this place," she gestured around the entryway, "will get top offers in days." Her eyes moved like a scanner over the hardwood floors Nathan had refinished himself, the custom molding he'd carved one winter when work was slow, the perfectly maintained garden visible through the back window. Every glance felt like an appraisal slip sliding into a folder Nathan hadn't asked for. "Why don't I give you the tour?" she said, stepping forward as if the decision had already been made. Nathan didn't move. "Actually, I think we should start with paperwork. If you have something to show me," that threw her. She blinked, recovered, and pulled out a glossy folder. Inside was a listing agreement already filled out. Daniel's and Paige's names were typed neatly under property owners. Nathan's was absent. "You seem to be missing someone," Nathan said quietly, tapping the blank space. Linda cleared her throat. "Oh, I'm sure that's just a clerical thing. Your son said you were simplifying ownership." Is that what he called it? Nathan asked. His voice was calm, but each word landed with a weight she couldn't quite place. For the next 30 minutes, Nathan let her talk. He asked polite, pointed questions. He noted every slip, like the part where she mentioned Daniel had been in touch for months, not days, or when she hinted they'd already discussed a family plan for the sale proceeds. She didn't realize she was handing him a blueprint. When she left, her parting handshake was as firm as before, but her eyes avoided his. Nathan closed the door, locked it, and stood in the quiet. That's when he pulled out the small spiral notebook he kept in the kitchen drawer. Page 1 was suddenly titled House Battle, Timeline and Players. He jotted down 7:12 a.m. call from Daniel. Ultimatum about selling. 9:05 a.m. Linda Harper arrives. Listing agreement already filled. No Nathan. Notes Daniel's involvement months, not days. Financial plan discussed without me. Nathan wasn't just defending a house. He was documenting a case. By noon, he'd made 3 phone calls, one to his friend in city records, another to a retired real estate lawyer he trusted, and the third to an old engineering colleague who now specialized in data forensics. All agreed to meet in the coming days. But first he had to face Daniel and Paige. That evening, he drove to their place, a modern townhouse on the other side of town. Paige answered the door, eyes wide in feigned surprise. Nathan, we weren't expecting you. Good, he said. We need to clear up a misunderstanding. She led him to the living room where Daniel was hunched over his laptop. He didn't stand. What's this about? Daniel asked, his tone already defensive. Nathan placed the listing agreement on the coffee table. This says you've been planning to sell my house for months. Without my consent. Daniel's jaw tightened. Paige crossed her arms. We're trying to help you, she said, voice sugar-coated with irritation. That house is too much for you to handle. You mean it's too much for you to wait for, Nathan replied. Daniel pushed back. Don't make this ugly, Dad. We can make this smooth, or... He left the threat hanging. Nathan studied his son for a long moment. This wasn't the boy who once helped him build a treehouse in the backyard, sanding each board until it was perfect. This was a man who saw an asset, not a father. I'll think about it, Nathan said at last, standing. But remember, every step you take leaves a trail. Daniel smirked as if that meant nothing. Nathan walked out into the cool night air, the faint smell of rain in the wind. He pulled his notebook from his jacket pocket, writing one last note under today's date. They believe I'm cornered. Perfect. The next morning, Nathan received an email with the subject line, Notice of Intent to Sell, copied to a law firm he'd never heard of. And that's when he knew they'd just made their first legal mistake. The email sat in Nathan's inbox like a lit fuse. Notice of Intent to Sell, from Harper and Lowe Legal Services, addressed to him, and yet the body of the message didn't even bother with a greeting. Per instructions from Daniel Cole and Paige Cole, co-owners of the property located at 1459 Willowbend Lane, we are notifying you of the intent to list said property for sale within 30 days. Please vacate the premises to facilitate showings. Nathan leaned back in his chair, reading it again. Co-owners. That word alone was the crack in their foundation. He knew his name was the only one on the deed. If they were calling themselves co-owners, either they'd filed fraudulent paperwork or they were bluffing to scare him into moving. He picked up the phone and called Jim Kavanaugh, his old friend from the city recorder's office. Jim, I need the latest property records for my place, and I need you to tell me if anyone's tried to alter the deed. Within the hour, Jim called back. Nathan, your name is still the only one on the title, but there's been an attempt. Someone filed a quitclaim deed last month, transferring half ownership to Daniel. It's pending because the notary's seal didn't match the registry. Nathan's lips pressed into a thin line. Sloppy, very sloppy. That evening, Nathan met with Laura Bennett, a retired real estate attorney who had been a sharp thorn in the side of unethical developers for decades. She studied the email, the listing agreement, and Jim's notes. They've already crossed the line, Laura said. Filing a fraudulent quitclaim is a felony in this state. You could press charges tomorrow. Not yet, Nathan replied. If I strike now, they'll play the misunderstanding card. I want them fully exposed before I move. Laura's eyes glimmered with a mix of admiration and caution. Then you'll need proof they acted knowingly, not by mistake. Nathan pulled the spiral notebook from his bag and flipped to the latest entries. That's why I'm documenting every move they make. Emails, phone calls, in-person conversations. I want a trail they can't wiggle out of. 2 days later, Nathan received a call from Ellen Reyes, a neighbor who'd lived next door for 30 years. Nathan, I don't know what's going on, but Daniel and that realtor were outside your house today taking photos. When they saw me, they pretended they were discussing landscaping. Ellen Nathan said, would you be willing to keep an eye out? Anything unusual, write it down. Dates, times, descriptions. You bet I will, she replied. I don't like snakes slithering in my yard. By the end of the week, Nathan's folder was thick with evidence, the fraudulent quitclaim filing, the listing agreement with his name missing, the co-owner language in the legal notice, witness statements from Ellen, and thanks to his tech-savvy friend Ray, a recovered email thread between Daniel and Linda Harper discussing how to handle Nathan if he resisted. That last piece was gold. In one message, Daniel had written, if he pushes back, we'll make it sound like we're just looking out for him. Once he's out, we can stage the place and get top dollar. Nathan knew the case was building, but he needed one more element, something that would force them to commit their intentions publicly. Once they lied in writing again, it would seal their fate. So he baited the hook. He sent Daniel a short email. Thinking over your offer. Let's meet Monday to discuss terms for me moving out. Within 2 hours, Paige replied, perfect. We'll bring the contract. This will be best for everyone. Nathan smiled at the screen. Yes, bring the contract. Monday evening, he sat across from Daniel and Paige at their sleek glass dining table. A thin stack of papers lay between them. Daniel slid them over. This is a mutual release agreement, Daniel said, as if it were a generous gift. You sign and we'll give you $60,000. Cash. You walk away. Nathan leafed through it. Buried in the middle was a line declaring him to have no remaining legal interest in the property. If he signed, it would validate their fraudulent claim retroactively. He looked up slowly. This is your best offer. Daniel smirked. Better than what you'll get if this goes to court. Nathan placed the papers back on the table. I'll think about it. Paige leaned in. Just don't wait too long, Nathan. The market moves fast. Nathan rose, pocketing the copy they'd given him. So do I. Back home, he slid the document into his evidence folder. Now he had it, their written, deliberate attempt to erase his ownership. He picked up the phone and called Laura. We're ready. I want the first move to be public. Loud enough they can't pretend they didn't hear it. Laura's voice was steady. Understood. Let's draft the notice. That night, Nathan stood in his workshop, surrounded by tools and the scent of cedar. He ran his hands over the old oak workbench his father had built. They thought they were just stealing a house. They had no idea they'd walked into a trap 30 years in the making. By 9:15 a.m., the county clerk's office had stamped Nathan's filing with an official seal, affidavit of ownership, and fraudulent claim notice. It was now part of the public record attached to the property's title. Anyone attempting to sell or transfer the house would see a glaring red flag pending investigation for fraudulent deed activity. Laura had worded it like a legal sledgehammer. Any person or entity attempting to transact on the property at 1459 Willowbend Lane should be advised of potential criminal charges under state law, including but not limited to filing false instruments, wire fraud, and elder exploitation. It was dry, precise, and devastating. At 11:02 a.m., Daniel called. No greeting, just rage. What the hell did you do? Protected my property, Nathan replied evenly. The same property you've been trying to sell behind my back. You're overreacting. This is just a misunderstanding. No, Daniel. A misunderstanding is forgetting to return a borrowed tool. Filing a fraudulent quitclaim is a crime. For a moment, all Nathan heard was Daniel's breathing sharp and uneven. Then the line went dead. By noon, Paige had taken over damage control. She left a voicemail dripping with false sweetness. Nathan, we can still fix this without getting lawyers involved. Let's meet and work out a better arrangement. Nathan didn't bother replying. Instead, he called Ellen. They're going to try something desperate. If you see anyone near the house, let me know immediately. Ellen chuckled. Already ahead of you. I've got my camera ready. That something desperate came less than 48 hours later. A black SUV rolled up just past dusk. 2 men in contractor gear got out, heading toward the backyard gate. Ellen, standing at her kitchen window with her phone recording, caught them on video forcing the latch. Nathan's motion-activated floodlights roared to life, freezing them mid-step. They mumbled something about checking the foundation and bolted. Nathan handed the footage to Laura, who sent it directly to Detective Harris, a contact she'd worked with on previous property fraud cases. Harris wasn't the type to wait for a disaster before moving. By Friday morning, Nathan's case file had a new section, Criminal Incident Reports. It now contained the attempted unauthorized entry, Ellen's video evidence, the fraudulent quitclaim attempt, the mutual release contract, and the email thread proving intent. "This is textbook," Harris said when Nathan met him at the station. "If they push again, I'll have enough to take it to the DA." "Let them push," Nathan replied. "They're not smart enough to stop." Sure enough, Saturday brought the next escalation. Nathan returned from a hardware store run to find a bright orange notice taped to his front door eviction order, with Daniel's name listed as primary owner. The document was stamped with an approved seal that looked official, until you noticed the seal was from a private process service, not a court. Nathan took a photo, peeled it off carefully, and slid it into his evidence folder. This wasn't just incompetence anymore, it was intimidation. That night, Nathan met Laura and Ray at his kitchen table. The mood was focused, surgical. "They're trying to create the illusion of authority," Laura said. "Fake eviction notices are a scare tactic. It's illegal and it's going to backfire." Ray tapped his laptop. "I traced the PDF metadata on that notice. Guess whose laptop created it? Pages. And she didn't even strip her username from the file properties." Nathan almost laughed. "They can't even forge properly." They agreed the next move needed to be a public strike, one that would reach beyond the county clerk's office. Something that would make Daniel and Paige realize the ground was no longer theirs. 2 days later, it happened. The Willow Bend Chronicle, the local paper, with a surprisingly active online readership, ran a front-page headline, "Retiree Battles Fraudulent Property Claim" by family members. The article, sourced from public filings and Nathan's affidavit, detailed the attempted quitclaim, the unauthorized entry, and the fake eviction notice. It didn't name Daniel and Paige directly, but it didn't need to. Everyone in their social circle knew exactly who the couple was. By that evening, Nathan's phone lit up with messages from neighbors, old friends, even former colleagues. Support poured in, offers to testify, to write character statements, to help with security. In the Cole household across town, the fallout was immediate. Daniel's contracting business Facebook page was swamped with angry comments. Paige's real estate agency removed her photo from their team webpage. Nathan sat back in his chair watching the ripple effect. They'd fired the first shots. He just made sure everyone knew who they were aiming at. Nathan held the paper under the kitchen light, the block letters, crude but deliberate. No signature, no identifying marks, just the stench of desperation. He slipped the note into a plastic evidence sleeve and called Detective Harris. "Anonymous threat," Nathan said. "Dropped in my mailbox tonight. Do not engage," Harris replied. "Bring it in tomorrow. I'll have the lab check for prints and fibers." This is escalating exactly how we thought. Nathan knew what the detective meant. Pressure makes sloppy criminals. And Daniel and Paige were starting to sweat. By mid-morning, Harris had the note bagged and logged. "Here's the thing," he told Nathan. "Threats cross a line. We can now justify a surveillance warrant." Nathan smiled faintly. "Then let's give them something worth watching." That something became Operation Hook, Line, Laura's term for baiting the opposition into making their next mistake on record. The setup was simple. Nathan would stage a meeting with a potential buyer, actually Ray posing as an investor, at the Willow Bend house. They would discuss a fictional cash offer in the driveway, loud enough for the hidden mic on Ellen's porch camera to pick up. They'd wait for Daniel and Paige to react. It didn't take long. Less than 24 hours after the staged meeting, Paige sent Nathan a message. "We've decided to accept an offer from another buyer. Please vacate within 72 hours to allow for the closing process." The audacity made Nathan almost laugh. He forwarded the text to Laura and Harris, who both responded the same way. Perfect. On Friday afternoon, Harris's unmarked sedan idled a block away from Nathan's house. 2 other officers were positioned at the corner. Ellen's cameras were live. Nathan kept his porch light off. At 8:47 p.m., the black SUV returned. This time, Daniel and Paige themselves got out, hauling a large plastic bin and a crowbar. They walked directly to the front door and straight into the open arms of Harris and his team. The entire exchange, the crowbar, the bin, containing fake ownership papers and a lockbox and their shouted protests was caught on 3 separate cameras. Harris didn't say much as he cuffed them, but Nathan heard him mutter, "Congratulations, you just made my job airtight." By Saturday morning, the arrests were public record. The Willow Bend Chronicle updated their headline, "Couple arrested in elder property fraud in attempted break-in case." The article included details from the warrant affidavit, which named Daniel and Paige outright. Their mugshots were already circulating online, but Nathan wasn't finished. Civil court still had to catch up with the criminal charges, and he intended to finish it cleanly. Laura filed an emergency injunction to quiet title, backed by the fraud evidence, the threat note, the break-in footage, and the arrest report. In plain English, Nathan was asking the court to strike any claim Daniel and Paige had ever made on the property, past, present, or future. The hearing date was set for the following Thursday. That week, Nathan's house became a small fortress of support. Ellen brought over fresh-baked bread and a bottle of wine. Old colleagues dropped by with stories of Daniel's shady dealings and past contracts. One man even handed Nathan a thumb drive saying, "This might help, it's all the fake invoices he gave my company 3 years ago." Laura's eyes lit up when she saw the files. If this is authentic, it proves a pattern of fraud, not just a one-off. Nathan poured her coffee. "I told you they've been making enemies for years. I'm just the one who decided to fight back." On the morning of the hearing, Nathan walked into court wearing a charcoal suit, steady and unhurried. Across the aisle, Daniel and Paige looked nothing like the smug schemers from weeks ago. They were pale, sleepless, and whispering frantically to their public defender. The judge called the case. Laura laid out the evidence with surgical precision: fraudulent quitclaim attempt, fake eviction notice, recorded break-in attempt, anonymous threat, arrest reports, and now third-party testimony about prior fraud. Paige tried to interject, claiming Nathan had consented to the transfer. The judge cut her off mid-sentence. "Mrs. Cole, there is overwhelming evidence to the contrary. You will remain silent unless addressed." When the ruling came, it was swift and uncompromising. Title II, 1459 Willow Bend Lane, is hereby confirmed solely in the name of Nathan Cole. Any and all claims by Daniel Cole and Paige Cole are null and void. The defendants are further prohibited from approaching the property within 500 feet. Nathan didn't smile. He just exhaled slowly, a man who'd carried the weight long enough to know this wasn't the final chapter, but it was the beginning of their downfall. The email sat open on Nathan's laptop, its lone attachment glaring at him like a silent dare. He double-clicked the PDF. The bank statement was from First Northern, an account he hadn't touched in years. It showed a $48,000 withdrawal dated 3 days prior. His name and old address were printed clearly at the top, along with a transaction location he didn't recognize. Nathan's first thought wasn't panic, it was pattern recognition. They're not finished. They're scrambling. By morning, Laura was seated across from him at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, scanning the document. "This isn't just sloppy," she said. "It's suicidal. If Daniel or Paige touch this account, they've committed interstate bank fraud. That's federal." Nathan nodded. "We trace the withdrawal, we get a timeline, and we hand it to the feds." Detective Harris arranged a meeting with a federal banking investigator by noon. The investigator flipped through the pages, his brow lifting slightly. "This was done in person," he said. "Fake ID. We already have the branch's security footage. You'll want to see this." Minutes later, the monitor flickered to life. Grainy but unmistakable Daniel wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, handing over a counterfeit driver's license. Paige stood behind him, glancing around the lobby. Nathan leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth curling just enough to be visible. They never learn. Within 48 hours, a federal warrant was issued. Agents picked up Daniel at a storage unit in the next county. Paige was arrested leaving a salon. Both were booked on charges of bank fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. This time there was no bail. The federal prosecutor's office called Nathan personally. "With your cooperation," the prosecutor said, "we're seeking maximum sentencing. Given the state-level convictions already in motion, this will ensure they're away for a very long time." Nathan thanked her, though the word felt small compared to the weight lifting from his shoulders. Weeks later, Nathan stood in the same kitchen where the first threat had arrived, now quieter than it had ever been. The Willow Bend house felt whole again, as if the walls themselves knew the storm had passed. Ellen came by with a casserole and a teasing smile. So, what are you going to do with all this peace and quiet? Nathan chuckled. Build something worth keeping, but this time with better locks. When sentencing day arrived, Nathan didn't sit in the front row. He chose the back among strangers who'd also been victims of Daniel and Page's scams. The judge read the verdict in a measured tone. Daniel Cole, 12 years federal, to run consecutively with his state sentence. Page Cole, 10 years federal, same conditions. Neither looked back as they were led away. Outside the courthouse, a local reporter jogged up to Nathan. Mr. Cole, any comment on the outcome? Nathan considered it for a moment, then spoke evenly. Justice isn't about getting even. It's about making sure they can't do it to anyone else. That's all this ever was. That night, Nathan sat on his porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset burn orange against the horizon. His phone buzzed a message from Laura. Case closed. Sleep well tonight? For the first time in months, he felt the tension leave his body completely. The fight was over, and the life ahead was his alone to define. In the quiet that followed, Nathan realized the real victory wasn't the house or the court rulings or even the sentences. It was knowing that no matter how deep the betrayal, he could and would take his life back on his own terms. In the end, Martin didn't just reclaim his home, he reclaimed his dignity. Those who thought they could corner him learned that patience and strategy are far sharper than anger. Justice may take its time, but when it arrives, it cuts clean too.